The biometric scanner blinked red at 8 hours and 47 seconds. 47 seconds past the hour. I pulled my badge away from the reader and stared at it, half expecting the plastic to melt in my hand from sheer bureaucratic pettiness. Around me, the morning shuffle of engineers and product managers flowed past like I was a rock in a stream, nobody making eye contact, everyone pretending the scanner hadn't just announced my cardinal sin to the entire lobby. My phone buzzed. Email from HR. Subject line: attendance violation, immediate deduction. I didn't open it. I already knew what it said. Apex Technologies had a policy, one of those dystopian little rules buried in the employee handbook between the sexual harassment protocol and the fire exit diagrams. Any clock-in after 8 o'clock a.m. results in automatic payroll deduction. $50. Non-negotiable. Didn't matter if you were carrying a server rack on your back or if traffic had turned the highway into a parking lot. The system didn't care about context. It cared about timestamps. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, swiped into the engineering bay and dropped my bag next to my standing desk. The open office layout stretched out like a factory floor, all glass and white noise and the faint electrical hum of 1,000 devices pretending to change the world. My monitor flickered to life. Another email, this one from Donovan, the VP of Engineering. Same subject line. Same body text. Except this one had a CC line that included my direct manager, his manager, and someone from finance I'd never even heard of. They wanted me to know. Wanted me to feel small. I logged into the payroll portal. There was clean as a scalpel. Deduction, $50. Reason, late arrival. Time, 8 o'clock and 47 seconds a.m. 47 seconds. I sat back in my chair, let the screen blur, and felt the exact shape of the anger settling in my chest. Not hot. Not explosive. Geometric. The kind of anger that doesn't scream. Codes. Because here's the thing nobody at Apex Technologies knew, not Donovan with his aviator glasses and his TED Talks about radical accountability, not the CFO who sent company-wide emails about tightening our belts while he flew private to Aspen, not even the CEO Gregory Vance who'd shaken my hand at the company retreat and told me I was integral to the vision. I'd been building something. Not for them. For me. It started 18 months ago, back when I still believed the equity grants in my offer letter meant something. I was a senior platform engineer then, responsible for the back-end infrastructure that powered Apex's flagship product, an enterprise resource planning tool that half the Fortune 500 relied on to manage their supply chains. Boring, stable, profitable. The kind of software that prints money while everyone sleeps. I worked nights and weekends. I refactored legacy modules that had been held together with duct tape and prayer. I optimized database queries that were choking under scale. I wrote deployment scripts that turned 3-day rollouts into 30-minute operations. I did it all quietly, efficiently, without fanfare, because that's what good engineers do. We fix things. We make the invisible visible only when it breaks. And Apex noticed. Sort of. They gave me more work. They invited me to strategy meetings where I was the only woman in the room and the only person who actually understood how the system worked. They nodded along when I explained technical debt like it was a foreign language, then ignored every recommendation I made and asked if I could just make it work by Friday. I made it work. Every time. But I never got the promotion. Never got the raise. Got a lot of "we'll revisit this next quarter. And you're doing great, just keep it up." And one memorable performance review where Donovan told me I needed to work on my executive presence, which I later learned was code for "you're not a man." So I stopped waiting for them to value me. And I started building insurance. The equity automation system wasn't flashy. It didn't have a slick UI or a pitch deck. It was a Python script, lean and mean, sitting on a private server I rented under an LLC I'd registered in Delaware. The LLC's name was Callahan Ventures. Population: 1. Assets: a P.O. box and a dream. The script did one thing and it did it perfectly. It monitored my equity vesting schedule, cross-referenced it with Apex's stock performance, tracked insider trading windows and waited. Waited for the exact confluence of events that would allow me to exercise my options, convert them to shares and sell them at market open during a liquidity event. All automated. All legal. All mine. I'd written the first version during a red-eye flight back from a client site in Atlanta. Apex had flown me out to troubleshoot a critical outage, the kind where CEOs start texting each other in all caps. I fixed it in 4 hours, then spent the rest of the trip writing code on a laptop with 6% battery and a rage I could taste. By the time I landed, the script was functional. Over the next year I refined it. Added fail-safes. Built-in contingencies for blackout periods, lockup expirations and SEC filing windows. I integrated it with real-time market data feeds. I stress-tested it against historical scenarios. I made it bulletproof. And then I buried a trigger clause in my employment contract. Nobody read the fine print. Not HR. Not legal. Not the bright-eyed recruiter who'd sold me on Apex's culture of innovation, with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never actually worked there. Buried in Section 12, subsection D, paragraph 4, was a single sentence I'd insisted on during negotiations. In the event of punitive payroll action taken against the employee, all unvested equity shall accelerate immediately and become exercisable at the employee's discretion. I'd framed it as protection against wrongful termination. They'd signed it without blinking. What they didn't know was that I'd defined punitive payroll action very, very broadly in a supplemental addendum I'd attached as Exhibit C. Any deduction, any docking, any reduction in compensation not tied to standard tax withholding or benefits elections. Like, say, a $50 penalty for clocking in 47 seconds late. I opened my calendar. Today was Wednesday, November 8th. Market opened in 90 minutes. Apex was 3 weeks away from announcing Q4 earnings, and the whisper numbers were stellar. The stock was trading at an all-time high, hovering just under $200 a share. Analysts were predicting a pop to $250 after earnings. I had options for 250,000 shares, granted over 4 years at various strike prices. Most of them were underwater when I joined, but Apex had grown. The company had gone public 2 years ago, and the stock had climbed steadily as they signed bigger contracts and expanded internationally. My average strike price was about $12. Current market price, $194. Do the math. I opened the terminal on my laptop, SSH'd into my private server and checked the logs. The script was awake, humming, scanning. It had detected the payroll deduction at 8:47 a.m., exactly as designed. It had cross-referenced the deduction against my contract. It had flagged the acceleration clause. Now it was waiting for my confirmation. I pulled up the email from HR again. Read it one more time. Felt the clinical detachment of someone who'd already made the decision but wanted to savor the moment before pulling the trigger. Then I typed a single command into the terminal. Execute, confirm trigger, market open. The cursor blinked. Then, trigger confirmed. Equity acceleration initiated. Exercise and liquidation scheduled for market open. 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. Total shares, 250,000. Estimated gross proceeds, $47 million. I closed the laptop. Stood up. Walked to the kitchen, poured myself a coffee from the pot that tasted like it had been brewed during the Carter administration, and stared out the window at the parking lot where my car sat in spot 247, the same spot I'd parked in every day for 3 years. In 90 minutes I'd be rich. And they'd still be trying to figure out why their stock had tanked. The morning crawled. I sat at my desk, headphones on, pretending to review pull requests while the clock in the corner of my screen ticked toward 9:30. Around me the engineering floor buzzed with the usual chaos. Someone was debugging a memory leak in production. Someone else was arguing about Kubernetes configurations in a Slack thread that had devolved into meme warfare. Donovan walked past my desk twice, didn't even glance my way. I was invisible. At 9:15 I got a Slack message from my manager, a guy named Eric who'd been promoted 6 months ago despite having the technical depth of a puddle. Hey Stella, can you jump on a quick call? Need to sync on the Q4 roadmap. I stared at the message. Felt the laugh bubbling up in my throat. Swallowed it. In a meeting. Can we do this afternoon? Sure. I muted Slack. At 9:28, I opened a private browser window and navigated to my brokerage account. The one I'd set up specifically for this. The one tied to Callahan Ventures. The one Apex had no visibility into because it wasn't their problem. He'll know. The market opened. And my phone exploded. Not literally. But close. Notifications flooded in. Trade confirmations. Execution alerts. Settlement notices. The script had worked exactly as designed. It had exercised all 250,000 options, converted them to shares, and dumped them into the market in carefully staggered blocks to avoid triggering circuit breakers or drawing SEC scrutiny. 250,000 shares at an average sale price of $188. Gross proceeds, $47 million. Minus taxes, fees, and the cost of the options themselves, I'd clear about $28 million. I refreshed the page. The number stared back at me, cold and factual and utterly, devastatingly real. I closed the browser, took a breath, and waited for the fallout. It took 11 minutes. At 9:41, the hashtag EngineeringAll channel in Slack lit up like a Christmas tree. Someone had noticed. Probably someone in finance or maybe one of the execs who had a live Bloomberg terminal open on their second monitor. WTF is happening to the stock? Did we miss an earnings call? Why is there a massive sell order at open? I scrolled through the messages, watching the panic spread in real time. Nobody knew yet. They just saw the symptom, the sudden dump of shares that had shaved $12 off the stock price in the span of 10 minutes. Then Donovan posted. Everyone stay calm. Looking into this. Do not talk to press or post anything externally. Too late. Twitter was already picking it up. Some retail trader with the handle @StonksWizard had posted a screenshot of the order flow with the caption, "Someone just rage quit $EX Elmo." By 10 o'clock, the CFO had sent a company-wide email. Subject: Stock Activity Update. The body was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. Temporary volatility. Normal market dynamics. Confidence in our fundamentals. Do not be alarmed. I wasn't alarmed. I was drinking my second cup of terrible coffee and watching my net worth refresh every 30 seconds like it was a sports ticker. At 10:23, Eric slacked me again. Stella, can you come to the conference room? No. I stood up, stretched, put on my jacket, walked slowly through the open office, past the clusters of engineers huddled around monitors, past the product managers whispering in doorways, past the recruiter who'd sold me on this place and who now looked like she'd just watched her stock options evaporate. The conference room was small, beige, and utterly soulless. Eric was there. So was Donovan. So was someone from HR I didn't recognize, a woman in a blazer with a laptop and the expression of someone who'd been told to take notes for legal. I sat down. Donovan didn't waste time. Stella, did you sell stock this morning? I looked at him. Really looked at him. The aviators were off now and his eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been staring at a screen for too long or maybe like he'd been yelling at someone on the phone. Probably both. Yes. Silence. Eric shifted in his seat. The HR woman typed something. Donovan leaned forward. How much? All of it. His jaw tightened. That's not possible. Your equity is on a vesting schedule. You can't just. I did. It's in my contract. I pulled out my phone, opened the PDF of my signed offer letter, scrolled to section 12, subsection D, paragraph 4 and held it up. Punitive payroll action triggers immediate acceleration of unvested equity. You docked me $50 this morning for being 47 seconds late. That's punitive. So my equity vested. And I exercised it. And I sold it. Donovan stared at the screen. Then at me. Then at Eric. Who the hell approved this language? Eric looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. The HR woman stopped typing. Looked at Donovan. Legal would have reviewed all employment contracts. If this clause was in the final version, it was signed off. Donovan's face went from red to purple. This is insane. He tanked the stock. She cost the company millions. I cost myself nothing, I said evenly. I sold my equity. My equity. That I earned. That you were never going to let me exercise anyway because you'd have found some reason to claw it back or dilute it or bury it under some new vesting cliff. I just beat you to it. This is. Donovan stood up, paced. This is sabotage. This is. Legal, I finished. Completely legal. I followed the contract. I followed SEC regulations. I filed the appropriate forms. I disclosed the transaction. I did everything by the book. Your book. The HR woman was typing frantically now. Donovan pulled out his phone, probably texting the CFO or maybe legal. Eric just sat there, looking like he'd been asked to solve a calculus problem in Sumerian. I stood up. Are we done here? Donovan looked at me. You're fired. I smiled. Not with warmth. With precision. No, I'm not. Because if you fire me now after I exercised equity rights that were contractually mine, that's retaliation. And retaliation opens you up to a lawsuit that'll make this morning's stock dip look like a rounding error. But if you want to try, go ahead. I've got a lawyer on retainer who specializes in employment law and she's very, very hungry. I walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back. Oh, and Donovan, you might want to check the employment contracts for everyone else on the engineering team. Turns out I wasn't the only one who negotiated that clause. I recommended it to about 15 people over the last year. Most of them took my advice. I didn't wait for a response. Just walked out past the huddles and the whispers, past my desk where my coffee had gone cold, past the biometric scanner that had started this whole beautiful disaster, and out into the parking lot where my car sat in spot 247. I got in, started the engine, and drove away from Apex Technologies for the last time, $28 million richer and not one single regret in my rearview mirror. The rest of the day unfolded like a fever dream orchestrated by chaos and karmic redistribution. I drove home, not to my apartment but to a coffee shop 3 miles away where the Wi-Fi was decent and nobody knew my name. I needed distance. Needed to watch the fallout from somewhere I could breathe. I ordered a latte, found a corner table and opened my laptop. The internet was on fire. Bloomberg had picked up the story by 11 a.m. Apex Technologies stock plunges on mysterious insider sell-off. TechCrunch followed 30 minutes later with employee exodus or strategic dump. Apex faces questions after $47 million share sale. Twitter was a cacophony of speculation. Some people thought it was a hedge fund. Others suspected a disgruntled exec. A few very smart cookies were getting close to the truth, piecing together the SEC filings I'd submitted and cross-referencing them with Apex's employee option grants. @StonksWizard had become the unofficial chronicler of the disaster, live tweeting updates with the glee of someone watching a building collapse in slow motion. Update. Source says the seller was an engineer. Not exec. Engineer. Someone check the option pool Elmo. I sipped my latte. Let the warmth spread through my hands. Felt the weight of what I'd done settle into something close to satisfaction. My phone buzzed. Text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Gregory Vance. We need to talk. I stared at the message. Gregory Vance. CEO of Apex Technologies. The man who'd built the company from a scrappy startup into a publicly traded juggernaut. The man who'd told me I was integral to the vision, while simultaneously underpaying me and ignoring every suggestion I'd made for 3 years. I typed back. No, we don't. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Stella, please. Let's have a conversation. I'm sure we can work this out. There's nothing to work out. I exercised my rights. End of story. You've caused significant damage to the company. To your colleagues. To people who depend on this stock for their retirement. I felt the laugh rise up again. This time I didn't swallow it. I called him. He picked up on the first ring. Stella. Greg. I kept my voice light, conversational. Let me stop you right there. I didn't cause damage. I revealed it. You built a company on the backs of people like me, people you underpaid and overworked and penalized for being 47 seconds late while you flew private and cashed out stock at every opportunity. You want to talk about retirement? Talk to the engineers who burned out fixing your technical debt while you told investors the platform was scalable and robust. Talk to the women who left because they got tired of being talked over in meetings. Talk to anyone who's ever looked at their paycheck and realized the equity they were promised was just a dangling carrot you never intended to deliver. Silence on the other end. I'm not the villain here, Greg. I'm just the first one who figured out how to stop playing a rigged game. You had options, he said finally. You could have come to me. We could have discussed your compensation. Your concerns. I did come to you. 3 times. You told me to be patient. You told me it wasn't the right time. You told me I needed to work on my executive presence, which we both know is code for, shut up and stay in your lane. So I stopped asking. And I started building. Building what? An exit plan. I hung up. The latte was cold now but I finished it anyway. My inbox was filling up with messages. Some from colleagues, tentative and curious. Some from recruiters who'd somehow already heard and wanted to know if I was looking. One from a journalist at the Wall Street Journal asking for comment. I ignored all of them. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and searched for real estate listings in Portland. Not Oregon. I'd always wanted to live near the ocean. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could write code without interruption and take long walks without bumping into anyone who knew my name or cared about my LinkedIn profile. I found a house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a porch that overlooked the water. It was listed at $1.2 million. I could pay cash. I bookmarked it. Then I opened my email and composed a message to the 15 engineers I'd helped negotiate equity clauses over the past year. The ones who'd listened when I'd told them to read their contracts carefully. The ones who'd trusted me enough to push back during their offer negotiations. Subject, time to fly. Body, you know what happened this morning. You know why. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Your equity is yours. Your time is yours. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Also, if you're staying, ask for a raise. They can afford it. Stella. I hit send. By 3 p.m., 3 of them had resigned. By 5 p.m. it was 7. By the time the market closed, Apex's stock had dropped another $18, and the exodus was making headlines. Mass walkout at Apex Technologies after equity controversy. Engineering team flees Apex in wake of compensation dispute. Is this the end of the tech bro playbook? I closed my laptop, packed up my bag, walked out of the coffee shop into the late afternoon sun. My phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Gregory. You've destroyed everything I built. I typed back without hesitation. Oh, I just stopped holding it together for you. Then I blocked his number, turned off my phone and drove to the nearest car dealership. Because if I was going to start a new life, I wasn't doing it in a 10-year-old Civic with a check engine light that had been on since 2019. I bought a Tesla. Paid cash. The salesman looked at me like I'd just walked off a spaceship. Congratulations, he said, handing me the keys. What do you do? I smiled. I used to fix things. Now I break them. The next morning I woke up in a hotel room overlooking the bay. I'd checked in late, paid for a week and slept for 11 hours straight. No alarms. No Slack notifications. No Donovan pinging me at midnight because something was broken and only I knew how to fix it. Just silence. I ordered room service. Eggs Benedict and coffee that didn't taste like despair. Opened my laptop while I ate and checked the news. Apex was in freefall. The stock had closed yesterday at $162, down over 15% from its open. This morning it was trading at $154 in pre-market. Analysts were downgrading it. Investors were demanding answers. The board had scheduled an emergency meeting. And Gregory Vance had stepped down. The headline was everywhere. Apex CEO resigns amid stock turmoil and employee exodus. I read the press release. It was vintage corporate spin. Personal reasons. Spending time with family. Confidence in the leadership team. All the usual lies dressed up in PR language. But buried in the third paragraph was the real story. Mr. Vance's departure follows revelations that multiple senior engineers exercised significant equity positions this week, citing contractual provisions that were reportedly overlooked during initial employment negotiations. Overlooked. As if it were an accident. As if I hadn't spent 18 months building this exact scenario brick by brick. I closed the laptop, finished my coffee, looked out at the water. For the first time in 3 years I felt light. Not happy. Not vindicated. Just unburdened. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there until I set it down. My phone buzzed. I turned it back on this morning mostly out of curiosity. Another text. This one from a number I recognized. It was Jamie, one of the engineers I'd helped with her contract negotiation last year. He was good. Brilliant, actually. The kind of developer who could see 3 steps ahead and write code that read like poetry. Still, I just resigned. Used your advice. They tried to fight it. Legal caved in 20 minutes. I'm out. Thank you. I smiled. Type back. What's next? Not sure yet. Maybe take a break. Travel. Learn to surf. Something that isn't debugging production at 2 a.m. Good. You earned it. What about you? I looked out at the bay again. Thought about the house in Portland. Thought about the code I could write when nobody was asking me to prioritize their roadmap over my sanity. Simp. Minus the surfing. I'm thinking ocean. Porch. Maybe a dog. You deserve it. Seriously. What you did, it wasn't just for you. You know that, right? I stared at the message. Felt something shift in my chest. Yeah, I know. Over the next week, 8 more engineers left Apex. Some exercised their equity. Some just walked out with nothing but their dignity and a middle finger for the org chart. The company's stock stabilized at $140, a 28% drop from its pre-disaster high. The new interim CEO, some guy named Roland who'd been pulled out of retirement, went on CNBC to reassure investors that Apex was fundamentally strong and positioned for long-term growth. Nobody believed him. The tech press turned the story into a case study. Harvard Business Review published an article titled, "The Hidden Cost of Retention: How Apex Technologies Lost Its Engineering Core." Fast Company ran a piece called "When the Builders Leave, What Happens to the House?" Even Reddit's engineering forums were ablaze with threads dissecting every clause of my contract and debating whether I was a hero or a cautionary tale. I didn't weigh in. Didn't need to. The market had spoken. The engineers had spoken. The only people still defending Apex were the execs and investors who had the most to lose. On day 9, I got an email from Joel, the lawyer I'd consulted a year ago when I first started building my exit plan. He was the one who'd helped me draft the equity acceleration clause. The one who'd told me it was legally sound but ethically spicy. Subject: well played. Body: Stella, I've been following the news. I won't say I told you so because you already knew. But I will say this. You just rewrote the playbook for every underpaid, overworked engineer in Silicon Valley. I've gotten 17 calls this week from people asking me to review their employment contracts. I'm starting to think I owe you a referral fee. Also, if you ever need representation for anything, you know where to find me. Pro bono. You've earned it. Joel. I wrote back. Keep the referral fee. Just make sure those 17 people get what they're owed. And Joel? Thanks. For believing me when I said this would work. On day 12, I closed on the house in Portland. Signed the papers remotely, wired the money, and got the keys sent to a P.O. box I'd set up in town. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't post on social media. Just packed up my hotel room, loaded the Tesla, and started driving north. The drive took 2 days. I stopped in small towns I'd never heard of. Ate at diners where the waitresses called me Hon, and didn't ask what I did for a living. Slept in motels with neon signs and continental breakfasts that consisted of stale bagels and OJ from concentrate. It was perfect. When I finally pulled up to the house, the sun was setting over the water. The porch was bigger than the photos suggested. The air smelled like salt and pine. I stood there for a long time, keys in hand, just listening to the waves. Then I went inside. The house was empty. No furniture. No dishes. No evidence that anyone had ever lived here. Just space. Possibility. A blank slate. I set my laptop on the kitchen counter. Opened it. The screen glowed in the dim light. I had emails. Hundreds of them. Job offers from startups and Fortune 500 companies. Interview requests from journalists. Speaking invitations from conferences. A message from a literary agent who wanted to know if I'd ever considered writing a book. I closed the inbox without reading any of them. Instead, I opened a new file in my code editor. Started typing. Not for a job. Not for a client. Not for anyone but me. I was building something new. Something that didn't have a business model or a pitch deck or a 3-year roadmap. Something that existed purely because I wanted it to. Freedom tastes like clean code and ocean air. And I was just getting started. 3 months later, I got a voicemail from Donovan. I almost deleted it without listening, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was different. Smaller. The swagger was gone. Stella. Donovan. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize. For what it's worth. I didn't understand what we were doing to you. To the team. I thought we were building something. Turns out we were just extracting value and calling it culture. He paused. I could hear traffic in the background. Like he was calling from a street corner. I left Apex. Got pushed out, actually. Board wanted a scapegoat. I took the fall. And honestly, I deserved it. What you did, it wasn't sabotage. It was accountability. I just wish I'd realized that before you had to burn it all down to make us see it. Another pause. Anyway, I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're building something better. You were the best engineer I ever worked with. I'm sorry I didn't tell you that when it mattered. The voicemail ended. I sat on my porch, laptop balanced on my knees, ocean stretching out in front of me. I thought about calling him back. Thought about saying something gracious or forgiving or wise. But I didn't. Because the truth was I didn't owe him closure. Didn't owe him absolution. He'd had 3 years to see me, to value me, to treat me like a human being instead of a line item on a balance sheet. He'd had 3 years and he'd chosen not to. So I deleted the voicemail. Went back to my code. And let the waves do what waves do best. Erase everything behind them and keep moving forward. 6 months after I left Apex, the company was acquired. Some private equity firm bought them for a fraction of what they'd been worth at their peak. The press release said it was a strategic partnership. The engineers who were still there said it was a fire sale. I read about it in the morning paper, the kind that still gets delivered to your doorstep in places like Portland, Maine. I was drinking coffee on my porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the fog roll in over the water. The article mentioned me. Not by name but by implication. The acquisition comes after a turbulent year for Apex Technologies, marked by executive turnover, stock volatility, and the departure of key engineering talent following a high-profile equity dispute. High-profile equity dispute. That's what they were calling it now. Sanitized. Bloodless. As if it hadn't been a war. As if I hadn't won. I folded the paper and set it aside. Pulled my laptop onto my knees and opened the project I'd been working on for the past 6 months. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't designed to scale to 1 million users or disrupt an industry. It was a tool. A simple, elegant tool that helped engineers audit their employment contracts, identify dangerous clauses, and negotiate better terms. I called it Callahan Contracts. It was free. Open source. No ads. No tracking. No monetization strategy. Just a thing I'd built because I didn't want anyone else to go through what I'd gone through. The response had been overwhelming. Thousands of downloads. Hundreds of thank you emails. A few people had even sent me pull requests, improving the code, adding features I hadn't thought of. One email in particular had stuck with me. It was from a young engineer in Austin who'd used the tool to negotiate a signing bonus and equity acceleration clause at her new job. Stella, I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted you to know. You changed my life. I was about to accept an offer that would have locked me into 4 years of vesting with no protections. Your tool helped me see the red flags. I pushed back. They said no. I walked. Found a better offer 2 weeks later. I own my work now. Thank you. I'd read that email 3 times. Then I'd printed it and pinned it to the wall in my office, right next to the copyright certificate from my Apex days. Proof that the work mattered. That I mattered. The fog had cleared by noon. I took a walk down to the beach, shoes off, jeans rolled up, cold water biting at my ankles. There were a few other people out, locals mostly, walking dogs or jogging or just standing and staring at the ocean like it held answers. I found a spot near the rocks and sat down. Pulled out my phone. Opened Twitter, something I rarely did anymore. Stonks Wizard had posted again. 1 year later. Apex stock still hasn't recovered. Company sold for peanuts. Engineers scattered to the wind. The legend of the $47 million revenge trade lives on. Someone write the movie. I smiled. Closed the app. They didn't need a movie. They had the story. And the story was simple. A woman was told she didn't matter. So she proved them wrong. Not with rage. Not with noise. With code. With contracts. With the kind of cold, calculated precision that only comes from being underestimated for so long that you forget how to doubt yourself. I stood up. Brushed the sand off my jeans. Started walking back toward the house. The sun was warm on my face. The ocean stretched endlessly behind me, indifferent and eternal. I thought about the younger version of myself who'd walked into Apex 3 years ago, full of hope and naive enough to believe that hard work alone would be enough. She'd been wrong. But she'd learned. And now she was free. By the time I reached the house, my phone was buzzing again. I pulled it out, expecting spam or another recruiter. Instead, it was an email from Jamie. Subject, guess what? Body. Stella, remember when I said I was going to take time off and figure things out? Well, I figured it out. I'm starting a company. A real one. Not some VC-backed growth at all costs nightmare. Something small, sustainable, built on actual values instead of exit strategies. I'm building a platform for contract workers, freelancers, engineers who want to own their work without getting steamrolled by corporate legal teams. Think Callahan contracts but bigger. More teeth. And I want you involved. Not as an employee. As a partner. Equal equity. Equal say. No bullshit. Think about it. No pressure. But if you're interested, let's talk. Jamie. I read the email twice. Then a third time. A year ago I would have said no immediately. Would have built walls around myself so high that nobody could reach me, because trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. But that was before. Before I'd proven I could walk away. Before I'd built something that mattered. Before I'd learned that freedom isn't about isolation. It's about choosing who gets access to your time, your energy, your brilliance. I hit reply. Jamie, let's hope. Send me the details. And congratulations. You're going to crush this. Stella. I sent it before I could second guess myself. Then I walked inside, made another pot of coffee and sat down at my desk. The one overlooking the water. The one where I'd spent the last 6 months rebuilding myself line by line, function by function. I opened my calendar. Blocked out tomorrow afternoon. Labeled it, New Beginnings. Then I went back to my code. Because that's what I did. I built things. Not for validation. Not for approval. Not for some VP who thought 47 seconds of my life was worth $50 of my pay. I built things because I could. Because the world needed builders who gave a damn. Because every line of code I wrote was proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I'd carved out a space in this world that was entirely, irrevocably mine. The sun set over the water that evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the light fade. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. This is Roland Fletcher, interim CEO of Apex. I wanted to reach out personally. We're rebuilding. New leadership, new culture, new approach. We'd like to bring you back as Chief Technology Officer. Name your price. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back. Thanks, but I'm busy building something that won't collapse the moment I walk away. Good luck with the rebuild. I hit send. Blocked the number. And went back inside to finish my coffee. Because some offers aren't worth considering. Some bridges are meant to burn. And some fights are won not by going back but by walking forward and never looking back. Apex Technologies would survive or it wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I'd built my own foundation. Poured my own concrete. Raced my own walls. And this time nobody else held the keys. 1 year later I stood in a conference room in Boston. Not as an employee. As a keynote speaker. The conference was called BuildCon, a gathering of engineers, founders, and people who actually understood that technology wasn't magic. It was work. Hard, deliberate, undervalued work done by people who rarely got credit and almost never got paid what they deserved. I'd been invited to talk about equity, contracts, and power dynamics in tech. The organizers had been cautious when they reached out, like they weren't sure if I'd say yes or show up with a flamethrower. I said yes. Left the flamethrower at home. The room was packed. Standing room only. I stood at the podium looking out at a sea of faces. Some young, some tired, all of them familiar in the way that people who've been chewed up by the same machine are always familiar. I didn't have slides. Didn't need them. I just told the truth. My name is Stella Callahan. A year and a half ago I was docked $50 for being 47 seconds late to work. That same morning I triggered an automation that allowed me to exercise and sell $47 million in equity. The company called it sabotage. I called it reading my contract. A few people laughed. Most just leaned forward. I'm not here to tell you to blow up your career. I'm not here to glorify revenge or pretend that what I did was easy. It wasn't. It was terrifying. It was lonely. And it only worked because I'd spent 18 months building leverage in the dark, hoping I'd never have to use it. I paused. Let the silence settle. But here's what I learned. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. It's designed to extract value from you until there's nothing left, then discard you and replace you with someone younger, cheaper, more desperate. It's designed to make you feel like you're lucky to be there, like equity is a gift instead of compensation, like loyalty is a virtue instead of a trap. Someone in the front row nodded. So if you take nothing else from this talk, take this. Read your contract. Every word. Every clause. Every buried addendum. And if you don't understand something, hire a lawyer. Not the company's lawyer. Your lawyer. Because the only person who's going to protect your interests is you. I looked out at the crowd. Saw the exhaustion. Saw the recognition. You are not a resource. You are not a line item. You are not expendable. You're the reason the lights stay on. The reason the code ships. The reason the company has a valuation in the first place. And if they don't see that, if they dock your pay for being human, if they call you difficult for asking to be treated with basic respect, walk. Build your own leverage. And when the time comes, use it. The room erupted. The applause wasn't polite. It was a release, a collective exhale from people who'd spent years being told to be grateful. Afterward, a woman from a big tech company waited until the crowd thinned. Your story gave me the push to leave, she said. I used your tool. Got my contract fixed. I smiled. You didn't need my push. You just needed to trust yourself. Go get what you're owed. Later Jamie texted, saw your talk. We just closed our $4 million seed round. Still want that partner role? I replied, yes. Let's build something that doesn't need revenge clauses because it treats people right from the start. I looked up at the city skyline. Somewhere someone was working late, getting docked for being human. I couldn't save them all. But I could build tools. Share stories. Show them the game was rigged, but not unbeatable. 47 seconds could cost $50. Or win $47 million. It all depended on whether they read the fine print. The next day I drove home. The house was warm. Colonel barked. I fed him, poured wine, and opened my editor. // Callahan Solutions, Employee Equity Protection System. / version 2.0. / because everyone deserves to own their work. The cursor blinked. I started typing. Line by line. Function by function. Building something that mattered. And I didn't ask permission anymore. The ocean whispered behind me. Colonel slept at my feet. Tomorrow I'd do it again. Tonight I was just Stella Callahan. Engineer. Partner. Builder. Free. And that was enough.